to approve or disapprove. So that's all we got on the agenda, right?
Yes, the agenda is focused on that project and discussions. It may have a little bit of bells and whistles, but
Okay.
and Lauren has to leave by 10. So yes, we're it was on the calendar by default for 2 hours, but
Yeah.
I think everybody going forward thinking it might be 1 is appropriate.
Yeah, I have a meeting at 10 as well. That'd be good. Okay, so let's bring the meeting to order then. And I guess I think at this point we'll just have some, you have some meeting slides. So Dean, why don't you take it from here and then.
Yeah, I don't know if there's anyone who's new to this meeting who would like to introduce themselves very, very quickly and just chime in. And if there isn't, if people are shy, then we could just keep rolling. Everyone is familiar with the protocols, so perhaps we can just go by those. And the agenda, like you said, I spelled it out on the agenda as continued discussion of this funding request. There are minutes available. However, since you haven't had time to see them, I would just suggest we defer action on the minutes. But there should be a distinct opportunity for public comment to comply with the open meeting law.
Yeah, I agree with that. Plus I don't have the protocols in front of me. I kind of know them, but I don't want to try to go through them all. So yeah,
Right.
Public comment would be good. Do we have any public comment or anyone new here that would like to introduce themselves? I think I saw some new faces.
I'm Stacy Pomeroy. I'm a river scientist with DEC Rivers Program, for those of you who don't know me.
Thanks, Stacy. Stacy, bring your mic a little bit further away from your mouth. Pretty loud. Thanks.
Is that better, Peter?
Yeah, that's better.
Thank you.
So if I can take the floor again, Mr. Chairman, I wanted to just throw out the possibilities of what we've been talking about, more details about the project and its phosphorus benefits, more detailed discussion about the project's cost effectiveness. There was something that came up about how does a project get considered by the council and by the QUISP when it's in the right of way, and I can say a few words about that if that's a question. And then really it's a matter of what's the path forward in terms of motions and votes, and that would be up for the group to decide. I understand the applicant is here. I don't want to preempt the applicant from making any kind of quick presentation. I have slides that I can share if that's something that the applicant doesn't mind me doing. But I did want to give them a chance to say whatever they would like to provide additional details about the project. Just to give a preview, I've got the where, I've got the what, and that there was a diagram. There's the how much. This was a table that was also included, the how much being how much phosphorus reduced and how much different parts of the project would cost. And then there was a summary. But anyway, I don't want to preempt the applicant. I see Ken's hand is up, so maybe he wants to take it from here.
As far as preempting your slides or what you want to present, Dean, I think that is just fine. I think that we will definitely want to comment or have an opportunity to say something. I just wanted to lend a little historical preview to this before we get started. And I just want you to understand that this project is something that there have been already been three assessment studies. There have been 2 complete designs. There's been full permitting and there's been construction bids that were obtained 8 months ago. These are about as fresh of construction bids as you can provide to a project. I think that they are much more current than some of the data that is going in to inform the cost comparisons that we were shown in the target formulations. And so I just want you have a little understanding of the history of this. We started working on this 17 years ago. What's being presented to you today was part of a project that was going to cost $400,000 when it was approved in 2019. And the history of this is that we got working on the project and ran into a lot of delays with permitting, but we brought that all up to speed. We were ready to go, and then COVID hit, and then we had a lot of delays with getting the construction on the ground and had to go to an amendment. So what you are seeing the parts of the project that are necessary to bring the whole project to whole. There's a lot of questions in the process that Dean was so good to just present to us with those 4 or 5 questions that he just presented to us. And I'm fully cognizant that this is the first time applications are being held on this process. I realize that we are going to be faced with a lot of questions and a lot of process that we're going to be determining in the first year as we're rolling these things out. And you're being presented with probably one of the most complicated projects that you'll ever be presented with at the very opening of this. So I'd like you to have this in mind, that this is part of a total package, that we use a lot of the phosphorus calculations in the completion of the first part of the project. And I think when you really get on the ground and do the project, and if we ever get around to actually doing measurements or understanding what the whole project is going to accomplish, I think that you've got to have both parts, both this uplands part that we're presenting today with the gully stabilization part that we've already completed. So I'll stop there, and then I think Dean, I think think we would be very willing to, go with what you've got to show, and then we're right here to answer questions and maybe make some additions as we go along.
Okay, well, I'm gonna reestablish my sharing here. And again, I'm not the expert in this project, obviously, and my goal is really to just provide a skeleton for the group to have a discussion. People know that this is a project that's still located along Route 7 near the intersection with 104A in Georgia, down near the boundary with Milton. And the graphic that I shared in the meeting packet was just holding together the overall picture that was included in the plan set, and then hopefully allow people to look at the individual pieces. I feel like it's better for me to show the actual slides from the plan set for people that want to look at any parts of them, but this is the overall view. North is to the right, so Route 7 is running from left to right. This is near the interchange. The project is, as Ken said, pieces of a larger project, some of which has gone forward. And the elements that we've been hearing about so far include gravel wetlands. And I believe this is a plan set that would have been prepared after understanding what the cost would be. And so you knew that some things weren't going to be done. So the constructed in future phases is the work that would be done with funding from the QUISP or from whatever source that is available that can pay for it. I'm not going to talk about the specifics. I just want people to know, and this is where people can direct questions to Kent and to Brandon, that it does have these multiple pieces that are along the Route 7 right-of-way, and it is a combination of things like gravel wetlands and culvert, hard infrastructure improvement is, I guess, what I would end up calling it. The summary table here, gravel wetland, catch basins, deep sump catch basins are all broken down. The pieces of the puzzle range in cost from about $14,500 to 120,000, making the total there with 294 and construction oversight another 45 on top, and that's what produced the total. The phosphorus amounts are relatively small compared to some of the other projects that we've seen, but they are what they are based on the calculator. Megan, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I just want to ask questions while you have this table up, Dean. So I'm just, the one component of the project I'm not seeing in this table is there was mention of construction of channel log jams to hold back sediment. So is that just not part of this phosphorus reduction calculation? And if that's the case, is what we're seeing potentially lower than, you know, what the phosphorus reduction could be?
I'm gonna defer to Brandon and Kent on this, but I think that it is part of the work that I'm calling like last year's work, even though it hasn't happened yet. But I'm going to defer to Brandon to address that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I can speak to that. And apologies, that was a slight oversight on my side. That is work that has not yet happened, and work that may end up being challenging for a contractor to actually construct. I am of the opinion that a mini excavator could obtain access from the auto shop next door and get down there with a small crew of, you know, people with chainsaws and do that work. The estimate that we had for the contract, or sorry, the estimate that I had prepared, that component would cost is, you know, $14,000 or so. It's pretty minimal. And I am of the opinion that that work could be covered in the ask, even though it was left out of this table. That was just an error on my case. But yes, to your bigger question, that would increase the phosphorus removal throughout that actual outfall channel.
Okay, thank you.
Chet?
Yeah, could we go back to the table? So the percent of efficiency for the total amount of phosphorus withheld is what here in this space?
Again, this is an element sort of getting into the guts of the phosphorus reduction calculator that's online. And again, I'm going to defer to Brandon since he prepared the slide.
I did not summarize the total efficiency, mostly because it's kind of a complicated calculation based on the amount of phosphorus directed to each practice. Again, to Kent's point, this is quite a complicated project and one that's kind of tough to quantify because there are so many different aspects. So we looked at it as a, you know, per BMP analysis.
Okay, and this 32,573 cubic tons, is it? I'm like looking at, is it CF or CT?
It's cubic feet, CF.
Cubic feet, sorry. So is that the amount of water that is retained per year by the you know, the various elements of the project?
Yes, that is
Okay.
true. That's the total storage volume provided by the best management practices within the entire project.
Okay, and this 1.13 is the cubic what per year? Cubic
1.13 is kilograms per year of phosphorus
kilograms.
produced.
Okay, right. So, but my question is, if you didn't do the project, how much phosphorus would be going into, you know, Lake Champlain or downstream of where the project is? I mean, this is the retention, but if you don't do the project, is there a way of calculating, you know, the negative results, I guess?
Yep, that's 3.28 kilograms per year. You'll see that in the column labeled load kilograms per year.
Okay,
That's the
Okay.
phosphorus loading to each BMP location.
right. Okay, and I mean, I have other questions, but they're related to other information further on down, so thank you.
Of course.
Dean, you're muted.
Thank you very much. Sorry about that. This summary table just does the arithmetic to show the cost per kilogram reduction. It is substantially higher than the basin-wide average if we just take the total available funds, divide them by the target. It's also substantially higher than the costs that are associated with stormwater type projects, which may be 3 to 4 times more costly on a per kilogram reduction basis. Just to recap, though, our target in this basin is about 40 kilograms. The amount of funding that's available in the year is about $550,000 for design implementation. We have $508,000. So the amount of funding that was requested is less than what's available. However, as I was saying at the previous meeting, we're trying to make investments in as cost-effective a way as we can. And it's really a question of, is it cost-effective enough to be a project that the WIC would recommend funding? We talked about this last time, but just to make a reminder, there is the annual target of about 40 kilograms. There's this training wheels target as we're just getting started. That's 8 kilograms, so that with the applications we've received, we would be getting over our training wheels level, but we're not quite there. We're about less than a quarter of the way towards what will be our annual. So we would be carrying a bit of a deficit going forward with the number of projects that we have. I'm gonna just stop there and see if there are any questions. I see Jed, your hand is up again.
Yeah, so I thought the request was for $340,000. Isn't that correct?
Yes, for this specific project, 340. This one alone, 340. Yes.
Okay, so that does take quite a percentage of the annual of 546.
It's a big chunk of the total for the year.
So my overall question is, besides the retention of phosphorus, what are the other benefits of this project? Because I mean, if you were just looking at phosphorus, to me, it's not worth it. But there must be other things that are, other improvements that are happening as a result. So that's what I'd like to look at, or have Kent or Brandon explain.
Yeah, I think the group should hear from them on that. Yes.
Yeah, I can briefly speak to that. Overall infrastructure improvements include the incorporation of deep sump catch basins and closed drainage infrastructure that will help take water off Route 7. The gravel wetlands themselves, as well as the catch basin risers, will help to attenuate flow, kind of peak discharges to the Deer Brook, which is, I guess, getting back to the point of phosphorus, it's really, really challenging to quantify how much of an impact that itself will have in the phosphorus reduction, because as we're attenuating flow, we're reducing erosive velocities to the Deer Brook Gully and to the Deer Brook, which obviously means that we're reducing sediment transport, because we're not going to get those large flashes of flow that will erode the actual outfall gully channel going to the Deer Brook. So I would argue that it's challenging to quantify, but I really do think that the phosphorus removal associated with this project is larger than 1.13 kilograms per year. And I think that by the time we actually get to constructing this project, we'll have a better idea of that removal potential. But that science is still kind of currently evolving. And if Stacy, if you wanted to speak to that, you'd be more than welcome to do so as well. But I really do think that the benefits are a lot greater than what we can actually currently display.
And Brandon, so how did you come up with this I'm sorry, I don't have the exact figure, but the 1.13 or whatever. I mean, given the overall statement was that until the project in all its manifestations is accomplished, you really can't decide what the benefits of phosphorus retention are. So I'm just wondering, theoretically, I mean, you said yourself that you feel like it's lowballed the actual amount, but how did you come up with that figure?
So the 1.13 figure was determined and calculated using the DEC phosphorus calculator. Back in, geez, I don't know, 2018, when we were doing the first iteration of designs for this project, what we had done was taken into account the benefits of stabilizing the gully, both by lowering the outfall elevation, reducing erosive potential at the outfall by installing these upland BMPs, and then doing a comparison of existing erodible sediment within that gully outfall, and I guess kind of quantifying the amount of sediment that we will be holding back by doing all these components of the project. We then took that volume and applied an average concentration of phosphorus per kilogram of sediment, which was 600 milligrams per kilogram. And that's based on a publication that is widely distributed and has been copywritten. Not one that we produced, but one that we referenced. And we found that the phosphorus removal associated with the entire project, and I might get this figure wrong, but I believe it was 9.78 kilograms of phosphorus reduction annually by constructing every component of the project. So when we did the gully stabilization itself at the outfall, we did not actually report to DEC a phosphorus removal. We reported, the metrics we reported were, I think, square feet of gully stabilized and cubic feet of gully restored. So again, DEC, I'm assuming, is taking those numbers on their end and applying some sort of a concentration to get those phosphorus numbers. But if I'm being honest, I'm not privy to what that phosphorus credit actually is on the back end of things.
Okay, thank you.
And just to jump in, the understanding I have is that the numbers for the phosphorus reduction that's attributable to the gully, or to the gully and the logjam potentially together, that happens once a year, and it has not happened yet for this project. So there is not a phosphorus number that is the DEC calculation based on the inputs that Brandon just mentioned. You can't go to the Watershed Project database and see the results of their arithmetic, but the results of Brandon's arithmetic is, as he said, it's actually 9.88. So I hope I'm not biasing the conversation with this, but just to see the big picture, the gully and logjam, I'll call that phase one. The remaining, that's essentially what we're looking at here. Oh, I'm having some issues on my screen. So can people still see this table?
Yes.
Okay. So if you combine it all into one, you can see the cost effectiveness, and I'm still having some issues here. The cost effectiveness improves if we can fold these new pieces into the work that's done. However, we are not in a position right now to be able to do that. Maybe someday. Brandon and I have had conversations about how it may be important in the future to look at certain types of projects as ones where, and I'm just going to stop sharing so I can get my screen fixed. Yeah, my apologies, folks. So I think I've got you back. Yeah, so it's not possible now to lump all of them together, but in the future, it may be that there are certain types of projects that are all or nothing affairs that we might not want to pursue them or fund them unless everything is done at once, because otherwise we're going to be facing this kind of challenge where the parts that get done initially have good performance, but the parts that get left behind do not. And then we're just wrestling with, well, do we do those other pieces? But the whole thing was designed to work together. So what do we do? Richard Goff, I see your hand is up.
Dean, I think that's my exact question. As I look at the chart, the cost of the deep sump catch basins is about 30% of the project would only produce less than 7% of the reduction in phosphorus. So it's like, can we do part of this project? But I think you're saying probably not.
Yeah, sorry, I had a phone call that I'm just turning off here. So the situation is not ideal when we have these open questions, and I don't know if there's going to be an answer to them in the short term. I have had some discussions with someone, or traded emails with someone at DEC about this issue, but there's really no clear answer. I see Lauren's hand is up.
Yeah, I think I just want to make the comment that like we're granted the decision-making approval here, but like the engineers don't make these plans lightly. Like they're built as systems. And I know we're supposed to be paying on phosphorus, but like I think to Brandon's point and to everyone's point, like we don't know. Like the tools we have are not great. And these are best practices that have been used for decades for stormwater, and just wanted to like encourage whole-minded thinking about this type of project, because benefits, like we won't know them. We can't measure them at the end of the day, the true benefits.
Jed?
So there were a couple other things, like minimizing toxic and pathogenic pollution was one of the claims for the project. So I wonder, besides phosphorus, what other kinds of pollutants are we talking about?
Pollutants associated with transportation, really. Metals and heavy metals and oil and gasoline and anything that could come off of Route 7. The way the deep sump catch basins work specifically, the deep sumps are 4 feet deep. So those work to capture sediment and any pollutants that would be attached to that sediment. And then VTrans is required by their 1111 permit to maintain those. So they come in with a vac truck and remove that sediment from those deep sumps. The outlet from those catch basins also has what's called a catch basin hood. So it's a kind of a component that comes down and blocks the outfall, and that acts to kind of separate any of the floatables, like the oils and the grease and stuff. So the water level rises up to that catch basin, and essentially the top of the water never has access to the outfall from the catch basin. So anything that floats on the surface can't actually get to that outfall pipe.
One positive that I saw was that, this $340,000 included in that was the 30 years of maintenance. I'm assuming that's part of it. Like the 30 years of maintenance was part of the $340,000. Is that correct?
That is true. And to speak to that, I kind of have to recall Dean's point from our last meeting, is that this is a unique project that is within the right of way, and technically it doesn't really carry any maintenance cost because VTrans is doing the maintenance. So, you and I are paying for that through our tax dollars.
Thanks.
Ken?
Yes, thank you, Peter. Before we leave the question of the phosphorus credits, Stacy Pomeroy was my mentor with DEC through the Gully stabilization part of it. That project actually started on the Gully stabilization. That started 4 years ago, and then it started at very high levels. It was prior to VTrans assigning much of their work to stormwater, as they are now doing. And the actual kickoff to this meeting was attended by the Secretary of A&R and VTrans, and it served as the demonstration or one of the very initial collaborations between the two agencies. That was the real power to this project. The money for the first project actually went through Lake Champlain Basin program and was administered by DEC. So that's why there's a very complicated trail to trailing these phosphorus benefits. Stacy and I have had a very good conversation about this, and I've just got to admit it's above my level of understanding and training. And I'd like to invite Stacy in at this point to give a better description of what we went through and how this. We're really hoping that the council will view this as a total package, and that this is a part that's very important to tie together to have the whole thing work. But would it be proper for me to invite Stacy in at this time, Mr. Chairman?
Oh, yeah, that would be fine. Of course.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kent. Yeah, I'll just kind of build on the continued discussion of the holistic view of the project, and also consideration for the group to think about long-term and additional projects that may be brought forward. The funding policy does put forward if a gully is going to be stabilized, that uphill stormwater should also be addressed as part of those efforts, to recognize that simply stabilizing the gully does not provide the overall benefit that's needed in the long term if you have not addressed the stormwater coming to the gully. As Brandon said, the small intermittent tributary that receives the stormwater will continue to be impacted by the high flows, continuing to increase its potential for erosion and sediment into the Deer Brook Gully itself. So it, it is difficult that the project has kind of come into you folks at this stage. There's a level of kind of different packaging and parts of it that have been completed or not completed. For stream phosphorus considerations with this, it is an intermittent stream. There are some phosphorus credits that the functioning floodplain tool may provide to the stream through a temporal phosphorus credit, meaning that by attenuating the stormwater up the watershed, you're reducing the type of flashiness that would come into the system that creates additional erosion and sediment entrainment. That's something that the FFI tool is very new, and I haven't had an opportunity to work with Brandon to see like what that would be. It's not going to be a humongous amount of phosphorus, but there would be some additional phosphorus through that, recognizing that the attenuation of stormwater is important to making sure that those systems remain stable. So I just kind of put it in context with the additional information that Kent has provided. In this project has been moving for a bit. Circumstances and timing sadly have increased the cost much more than was initially proposed. And phosphorus crediting process has also been shifted some in how and what values are used since the project got started. But it is a good example of the type of project that I think your council may have been, I think there's another gully down the road that's been perhaps brought to you for some scoping. Again, there will be likely stormwater considerations. And so these projects are going to be ones that may be very costly, but have lower phosphorus credits. So that might be, something that the group will have to kind of consider as you move forward. But it would be a shame to have gotten this far with this project and not see some funding put towards it to continue to see the improvements holistically for the site. So I'll stop there, and if others have questions or thoughts.
And then Megan.
Yeah, Stacy, thank you for that. I'm looking, looking at the funding policy, and I'm looking at the language that you were referring to about linking gully work with the upstream work. The language in the current policy, which was adopted in December, says DEC needs reasonable assurances that in-gully work will be coupled with addressing the causational stormwater factors upstream, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if people want the details, I'm happy to share that. But if we were, if the first project had been brought to the council, and by the first project, I mean the in-gully work, then it would have been necessary in order to comply with the funding policy to have this reasonable assurance that the upstream work was going to happen. And I think that, that's the world we will live in going forward. My question is one, maybe you can answer, maybe you can't. I believe the funding for the first year came from Lake Champlain Basin Program. And would I understand correctly that they have no such policy requirement that says, before we give you the money for the gully, we have to have reasonable assurance that the upstream work or problem will be addressed? Is that correct, basically?
Dean, I don't know the policy language. Typically, they have been working to at least honor DEC's overall funding work. Obviously, that language has new or changed over the years. And also, I would say at the time that the funding was provided for the project, the expectation was the entire project would be able to be completed. So there wasn't expectation that this part wouldn't have been completed. But, it was very much coming off of COVID and prices very much different. It was recognized that the first priority was really needed to stabilize the outlet structure. That was the first step that could be accomplished and would provide the most immediate benefit. But the expectation would be that, designs had been created, permittings had been done, construction bids have been provided at cost, with the thought that things would be moving forward, not that the project would just stop here because that was what we got accomplished.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Chairman, one thing I just am going to float off the top of my head is that at some point today, I'm expecting there will be a vote. Perhaps before there is such a vote on a project, the group might want to consider adopting some kind of motion that says effectively to DEC, hey, DEC, as a council, if we're facing these kinds of situations, we would like you, DEC, to give us the flexibility to count the total amount of phosphorus. We inherited this problem, or the council inherited this problem, and that you could just send the message to DEC that as a matter of policy, that WICS should be able to look at the total, because otherwise it puts you in a real bind. And so it's just something for the group to consider. Would you want to make such a request and go on record as saying that you feel like it would be right to have this flexibility? And however that turns out, either you adopt something or you don't, it's done. But it may help set the stage for the actual vote. It's just an idea. Thought I would mention it, and then I'll stop talking.
Okay, I think I'm following you. But yeah, flexibility, and I just to comment real quick, and based on something Stacy said as well, it's that the stormwater projects in general, the number for what the expectation of those is pretty skewed due to inflation for one, and they're much pricier than the other projects in general. And so when you try to average out the phosphorus number, it's very difficult when you have a skewed number like that. And it actually statistically is probably not the way we should be working. It should have its own sort of stormwater project in developed areas should have their own sort of criteria on some level, and that needs to be recognized by the DEC. It needs to be recognized by us. And I think that's where that flexibility should be more ironed out as far as what the language is. Because I'm not quite following. I think I know what you're talking about, in general flexibility on the part of the BWQC to make their decisions, even if that number is not near what the DEC has in their protocols and or not protocols. What's the word I'm looking for? In the language of the QUISP that the QUISP was given. so I just thinking going forward, it's going to inform them, you know, and I don't know if we need to have that language. Maybe just these decisions alone will make the point. But yeah, I don't know if that's something I can come up or we can come up with this meeting or not. That kind of language asking for some sort of flexible forgiveness ahead of time. I don't know. I think that's there's more discussion there, and I guess I'll move it on to, I think, Megan, your hand's down now, right? All right, Jed, I think you were next.
Yeah.
Brandon.
So three things. What money would we have left for additional projects for the rest of the year, given that we approved this one? And then there was a question of co-benefits, a score of 3, and I just would like some, clarification about how that came up, what the co-benefits are. And then finally, like when I looked on at least the map I've got, a gazetteer map, I was looking for like, where is Deer Creek relative to like Lake Arrowhead and Lake Champlain? I couldn't even find it. So those 3 things.
Maybe it makes sense that Brandon's next.
I don't have all those answers for you right off the top of my head. I don't have the application package open at the moment. Dean probably does. And he could probably speak to those co-benefits, but the Deer Brook is, it's, I think 350 feet or so from the outfall, roughly from the intersection of Route 104A and Route 7.
Okay. And then Dean, given that we approved this at $340,000, how much money do we have left to work with?
Yeah, so if this project is approved, it would mean that all of the requests made for design, it would mean that all of the requests made for design implementation funding could go forward, and that total is about 440,000. And so 440,000 is out of a total of 508,000. So it's about 68,000 that would not be drawn down and would be carried over into the next year, understanding, and I think I've said this before, the amount gets reset annually. So we would be looking at more funding becoming available. But if you want to just know how much is left in the current year, it would be about 68,000.
So that would be the most we could have to approve of additional projects this year. Is that correct?
Well, kind of, sort of. I mean, the thing that I think that this group will start to develop is the ability to act on things, but program them in time. So what I'm saying is that it's possible that you can say yes to a project and tell the recipient or the applicant that the funding stream that it's going to be used is the one that starts in July 1. So there is that ability. You can look ahead to this additional funding. And so if we're in a crunch with another round that happens before July 1, you could very well say to some, okay, you're going to use up the rest of the current fiscal year, and you next in line are going to be tapping the funds in the following year, and so on. There will be some procedures that develop to do that. I'm quite confident.
And it will be the same amount for the following fiscal year as it is for this fiscal year.
Oh, I believe so, or close. So don't quote me exactly, but I think that,
okay.
Same. I mean, for
and then the issue of the co-benefits. Could somebody answer that? How the number came up and what they are?
Yeah, I think I'll probably defer to Dean on that if he has the application handy. But before we move on, I just wanted to make the point to add an additional wrinkle, sort of, I guess, to Dean's comment about allocating funds per annual or per year rather. This project, while we're coming to you for funding in 2023, is not likely to actually get constructed until 2024, just because of the place where we're currently situated in the year. A lot of contractors are getting their work already on the calendar or already have their work on the calendar. So, and Ken, please forgive me if I'm speaking out of turn. I don't think I am, but I think our expectation would be to bid this project in, late winter or spring 2024 for 2024 construction.
And to that point, we can carry over funds, and the direction that we have from DEC, I understand it, is that we will spend the oldest money first. So I think initially, if a project like this was funded, we would be thinking it's going to draw from the current year. But if there's another project that gets approved that moves ahead, well, that project might end up drawing from the current year. And that would mean that things roll over to the next year. So this is going to become pretty complicated. The good news is we can carry over funds. The complication is we spend old money first, and we're just going to have to be juggling and sliding and moving around the money to make everything line up. I don't know, Jed, if you had a follow-up. I can say just a little bit about the co-benefits. I have a summary table here. The thing that I was going to say is that for this project, the number of co-benefit areas that the application indicated that the project addresses was 3 out of 6. So it got half of the maximum number of points, but without stepping aside to pull up the application, I would have to, I can't remember exactly what those 3 of the 6 were, but maybe Kent can address that issue if Brandon, with me talking, hasn't had a chance to pull up any notes he has. But it's roughly half of the maximum, or 3 of the 6 areas that the project said that it would address in terms of co-benefits. I'm sorry, that's the best I can do at the moment.
And I do not have that in front of me, so I can't tell you exactly what was checked off, but I can tell you that it is located in a part of town that the town intends to develop. They call it the South Village. They intend to put more development and add more impervious surface to that part of town. So the timing on this project and working in this upland area is critical to get it there and get it in place. So it is part of that new town plan as they develop that part of town. And I'm not sure that that is located in the benefits or not, but I think that that's the power of these councils, is to listen and to understand that what other things there are involved with this. But that's another part of the strategy that's very, very much involved with this, as well as the part that I talked about before, where this was one of the initial cooperations that was drawing VTrans into its responsibility for stormwater and what it's been doing with it. A lot of the problems there were created when the interstate came in. And at that time, they did the things to the best of their understanding, but everything was undersized. And there are still constructions going on there with the interstate that are impacting that brook. Where it enters, it's only about 1.5 miles from the Lamoille River as it goes down to Arrowhead Mountain Lake. That the Deer Brook has been declared an impaired waterway. And actually, that's been one of the goals that Stacy and Karen have been working with us, is we'd like to improve the status of that brook. And this was a very important step to improving the status of that brook. So I don't know if that's actually in the benefits or not. I'm not looking at it, but I think it's a very important part.
So I can speak.
Thanks, Ken.
Jed, I can speak to this. I was able to pull up the application, and I guess to Kent's first point about being in the plans, this area is planned, like the development in this area is already planned. And these projects or projects along these lines are within the tactical basin plan. So while that's not actually a co-benefit, we did include, or we were able to credit some points. Dean, I think we got full credit for, what is it? Shoot. a different category. Essentially, like, is this project already planned? Is there already support for it? And we were able to answer yes for that. The co-benefits that we credited here are number 2, clean water and sanitation, because the project directly addresses reduction of key pollutants other than phosphorus. They can include, but are not limited to, nitrogen, sediments, road salts, heavy metals, microplastics, pathogens, and other contaminants of emerging concern. Number 3, ecosystem services and climate resiliency, because the project addresses the co-benefits related to the ecosystem services and climate resiliency that may come with reducing phosphorus. Ecosystem services include carbon sequestering, flood resiliency, reducing erosion, promoting pollinators and native species and biodiversity. And I won't read the next one because it's kind of lengthy, but education. And we were able to credit that because it includes aspects of public outreach. And as a clean water project, Kent will be reaching out to the public and letting them know what's going on. And there'll also be a sign placed at the project site saying that it's an implementation of a clean water project.
Thanks, Brandon.
Yep.
There are a number of folks who do have to leave at 10, so time is fleeting.
Okay, I'm just looking at hands. Looks like they're coming down. And Dean, I wanted to just not forget what you were requesting as far as making a future motion about flexibility with the DEC, and I don't know really where to go with that at this moment, other than asking you perhaps if you have some language that you want to iron out in regards to that.
I think that in the interest of time, it's something that we can come back to, as you
Okay.
said yourself, that whatever vote you take will signal at least a position to some degree on this. So
Yeah.
I think we can come back to it. I think the primary matter for the group is to make some decision regarding this application, even if that decision is to take more time to make the decision. But I don't want us to run out of hands to act.
Okay.
Could I make one quick comment on this point?
Sure.
So I don't know if the group can really consider this, but sort of, I guess, in support of Dean's position and being able to credit projects as a whole. If we were still looking at this project as a whole, the actual efficiency would be more like $50,000 per kilogram rather than what we're presenting today. And again, that's based on our calculation of phosphorus reduction based on an assumed concentration of phosphorus per kilogram of sediment. And it can't really be quantified within DEC's current framework, at least not yet. But that number, even though it's above the, is it $16,000 per kilogram that is the target, $50,000 certainly looks a lot better on paper, unfortunately, than what we're able to provide today.
Thanks for that. Okay, I guess in the interest of time, I just want to ask if there is any more questions or discussion at this point.
Hey, Peter, I think this is now into your business part of the meeting. So unless there are other questions from the group, I'm going to step out so you guys can have your business part of the meeting.
All right, thank you, Stacy, for coming. That's great.
Thank you, folks.
Always
Enjoy
good to see
the
you.
afternoon. Take care. Bye.
Okay, well, yeah, I think do I hear a motion? I mean, unless there's any more discussion, do I have a motion to approve the Brook Gully erosion project based on the Lamoille Quist ranking process and the feedback and review of the Lamoille BWQ?
I make that motion.
All
Where's
right, Lauren, I hear Lauren making the first motion. Do I hear a second?
I second the motion. This is Erin.
Okay, Aaron seconded the motion. I see other hands too. I guess I'll stop here if those hands have more elements of discussion they need to bring up. Jed, is that just an aye kind of thing? Okay, all right. Okay, so all in favor of approving the Brook Gully erosion project, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Okay, Any abstentions?
Peter, could we just have a little bit more time, because I want to make sure we've tracked the votes correctly.
Okay.
So if I just read a name, could we just hear a yes or
Sure.
no? So Lauren, how did you vote?
Yes.
Richard Goff,
Yeah.
that was a yes.
Right.
Kent is recusing. Sarah's not here. Brad.
Yes.
Peter.
Well, I don't know if I,
Okay. Jed.
Yes.
Aaron.
Aye.
Okay. So thank you. I needed to be able to be clear about that, but
okay.
it wasn't.
In the future, do we need to talk about that as a policy? Just because so far we just accepting sort of the ayes and nays and whatnot, or do we need to think about redrawing that?
Well, my concern is that I only really saw 2 very clear yeses, and
Okay.
I need to know there are 5. We need
Okay.
to know there are 5, and that's
And I think
why.
part of the protocol is just to say aye, I think, in this circumstance, and not raise your hand. The raising hands, I think, are for if you need to speak. Am I understanding their protocols correctly?
So as far as how the votes are conducted, yes, but for the purposes of recording this and making it accurate, I need some way to do that. That's all.
Yep. Yeah, and I think part of the confusion was some people were raising their hands and others were saying aye, and I think we need to keep to one uniform response, and let's make it vocal. And then, of course, you can always backtrack and ask people specifically as well. Okay.
Peter, just a suggestion. I serve on the Heinsberg DRB,
Mhm.
and we had adopted the policy of when you're voting for a project, or for an application, you just state your name. So when I vote in favor, I say Brandon Martin, aye. And
Okay.
folks just kind of like take their turn and let people speak.
I'll definitely, Brandon, that's a good suggestion. I think in the future meetings, we'll discuss that. I think we had originally just agreed with the aye approach, but I've seen that can be some complications there. So we can readdress that in future meetings, Dean, if we want to put that on an agenda. That'd be something we could do. All right, in any case, the ayes have it. I don't know if I said that, but now I am. So the Deer Brook Gully erosion project has been approved.
Thank you. So in the minute we have left, and I do know that some people have to go and we may lose the forum, and so bear with me. We were going to be talking about when is the next round, and I'm having these issues again. My apologies. So essentially, it boils down to.
I can also share if you need me to.
Okay, I think people can see the slide schedule.
Nope.
No.
Yeah, Dea, can you share that?
The
Okay,
screen you want?
Yeah, thank you, Dea. So,
Okay.
so as far as the issues, I've listed some things. The scope of the request. By that I mean, are we going to be focusing? Would the council like to be focusing on any particular types of applications, or will it be general and open to all? This is just something to think about. How much time do we provide to applicants to put their applications together? This is something that came up. We provided 6 weeks at the initial with this first round, but perhaps it doesn't need to be 6 weeks. How much time is provided to do the prioritizing after the deadline is reached? Avoiding conflicts with meeting dates and other things. And then will it take more than one meeting to make our decision? So Dea, if you could go to the next slide. Just the next page, yeah. So in thinking about this, I set some minimums and maximums. So if this group was very intent on having another round go out, it could happen as soon as a week from now, I would say. But it would be basically the same process. So some of the things that we thought we would change, like the application form, we would probably have to use the existing approach. But if we took more time, things could be improved, and that might be on 3 weeks. I could see us cutting the time between the application release and the deadline by a couple of weeks. However, some applicants may run into trouble because if they need sign-offs from DEC staff, this is not the best time of year, and there could be some risk. So I'm saying between 4 and 6 weeks. It takes about a week to pull the materials together at a minimum. I think that it's better to have more time. And so we could be looking at as many as 3 weeks. It takes 1 week to do the prep, get the packets out for the group, irrespective of the other things. And then it's also possible that if we take more than one meeting, we could have a meeting and then another one a week later. Or it could be that there's a meeting and it's a month later. So Dea, if you could just go to the next. So I just wanted people to understand that if there was a desire to insert another round, it would be possible. The next regularly scheduled meeting of this group is May 25th. And we could conceivably have materials done by May 25th, but we would be cutting things very, very close, and it would be like the minimum amount of everything. I just wanted people to know that if there was an intention for the group to get things done, it could happen, but it might be risky. If we took more time, or if we assume that things are going to take more time, it's going to put us in the position of the decision being made perhaps in July. So I'm just going to stop talking there, since I believe we might have lost the quorum. 1, 2, 3, 4. No, we have a quorum, so we can keep talking. So I'm just looking. I think I saw some messages in the chat that I want to make.
Chad, yeah, he made a message that we had seems like we originally agreed to meet quarterly. So could we wait until June to evaluate new applications?
And if that's the case, I'm comfortable with it. And in fact, I'm more comfortable with that than trying to rush things. And if that's the consensus of the board, then that's the way that I will move. I will not try to get things done ASAP.
I would also bring back the idea of rolling applications. So once we've had the initial round and the rest of the year, there's that 60,000 that's left, that there is sort of an open time frame for people to submit applications, like in other block grant processes I've been in, and that takes a lot of pressure off of us in the sense that you just get and then there's a deadline, of course, as to when that will end. But I thought we'd bring that back into the mix.
Yeah, and I do have on my notes a very clear indication that this idea of having the applications open for a longer period of time, and they would sync up with the quarterly meetings. That is certainly something we're moving towards. The reason I put this into play was just that I had some sense that some members of some of the councils wanted to get things going as quickly as we could. And I just didn't want to leave that idea behind. And so it sounds like we're just going to fall into this quarterly schedule, and we are not going to try to do anything that's blasted a second round before the new fiscal year starts. And we've used most of the money anyway with the action that you've just taken. So it's becoming moot.
Mm-hmm.
And I see Megan's hands up.
Yeah, real quick, and then I gotta hop on the other meeting. Yeah, I would just emphasize, don't rush it. You know, there's a lot of projects that I think a lot of us probably have in the queue, or that are going through certain design phase now, which may be more ready in the fall. So it would be nice to still see a fall round, and I don't think we need to rush things. I guess it's my 2 cents.
Thanks, Megan.
And I gotta hop off. Thank you, Dean. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, everybody.
See you in a minute, Megan.
Yeah, see you soon.
Yeah. It's a Basin 8 tactical basin plan meeting.
I do too. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, so I'll just make Dean at this point. I'll just
Yeah, the meetings,
Your motion to adjourn the meeting.
yes, it requires no second because you've lost your quorum.
Okay, well, never
So the
mind.
minutes will show that the meeting ended with the loss of a quorum at 10:06.
Okay,
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everybody.
thank you, everyone.
We
Thanks a
appreciate it.
lot.
Get around.
Daya, do you have a minute after?
Yeah, I was going to ask the same. Let's stop the meeting.
Actually, I have one question.